So a lot of futurists define humanity as Homo sapiens, our species, and whatever descendants we might have in the future, so long as they have a certain moral status, they're intelligent like we are, and so on.
Yeah.
So an implication of that is that our species could die out, maybe in the next decade, maybe violently, without human extinction having occurred. So, I mean, the doomers like Yudkowsky and so on, they want AGI, and they want machine superintelligence as soon as possible. They just think that we're not prepared for it yet. So what they want is AI safety research to lead the way, with AI capabilities research trailing behind. And if you cross the AGI finish line in that configuration, then you get utopia. Because by definition, if you've solved the AI control problem from their perspective, then you have a superintelligence that can enable you to live forever, colonize space, and so on.
Right. I believe that. Do you believe that? Do you believe that it's sort of like if it's just a question of order or inverse order?
Yeah. So I mean, my feeling is that I think AI safety is thinking about the issue in the wrong way.
Welcome to For Humanity, an AI safety podcast, episode number 25. Does the AI safety movement have it all wrong? Dr. Emile Torres interview. Today's show has been one of the most thought-provoking podcasts I've ever produced. I'm really excited to share it with you and get your reactions and thoughts. I'm John Sherman, your host. Thank you so much for joining me. This is the AI safety podcast for the general public. No tech background required. This show is solely about the threat of human extinction from artificial intelligence. Over nearly 6 months now, every week we have been building a community here of people who believe that AI is the greatest threat to humanity. Last week, for the first time, I opened up donations on this podcast for one purpose only: to buy YouTube advertising to get more views and subscribers so we can spread the word and convince more people. I was deeply moved to receive more than $500 in donations in the first week from more than a half a dozen donors. I am personally matching any donations, so in 1 week we have more than $1,000 to spend on ads. I've been spending $10 a day myself for 6 months, so this is going to give us a big boost. I'm working on getting new campaigns up and running, so you will see the impact of those donations in the coming weeks. If you want more people to see this podcast and hear these messages, there is a donation link in the description. I deeply appreciate any support you can give. Okay, so there was one very exciting thing in the news this week. Paul Christiano, a certified, bona fide, very serious AI safety researcher, was named the head of the first of its kind U.S. AI Safety Institute. This is the government agency under the Department of Commerce that is hopefully going to help save us all. This is fantastic news for those of us who don't want AI to kill every living thing on Earth, as most AI safety researchers believe the default setting now is. Paul Christiano is one of those AI safety researchers who believe the current default is an extremely high percentage chance that we all die from AI, something we call P-Doom. Here is the new head of the U.S. AI Safety Institute, Paul Christiano, telling the hosts of the Bankless podcast that he thinks AI is the thing that will most likely kill him personally.
Eliezer said, we asked him, hey, is there someone else we could talk to about this? And he mentioned you. He said, talk to Paul Christiano. He said, you are someone he respects and brings some of the counterpoints to his take. So let's get into them. Why don't we just start by wading into the deep end of the pool here? What is your percentage likelihood of the full-out Eliezer Yudkowsky doom scenario where we're all going to die from the machines?
I think this question is a little bit complicated, unfortunately, because there are a lot of different ways we could all die from the machines. So the thing I most think about, and I think Eliezer most talks about, is this sort of full-blown AI takeover scenario. I take this pretty seriously. I think I have a much higher probability than a typical person working in ML. I think maybe there's something like a 10, 20% chance of AI take over most humans dead.
That's really high.
I agree. And then I think beyond
Better
that,
than 100, David. Just better than 100%.
We're trending in the right direction.
I think there are I think in some sense I'm still quite a gloomy person. So there's other ways that the development of AI can be rough. Like there's other ways that you can have access to new destructive physical technology, other disruption. So I think you're maybe looking at some other risks from that transition to AI. And that, adds up to at least another 10%. And then maybe a bigger background part of both my view and Eliezer's view. I think Eliezer is into this extremely fast transformation once you develop AI. I am have a little bit less of an extreme view on that, but I still think it is the case that compared to what is kind of default expectations in the world, things are going to be really fast. So we could talk about the development of AI, but then you might also want to talk about what happens right over the coming months or years. I tend to imagine something more like a year's transition from AI systems that are a pretty big deal to kind of accelerating change followed by further acceleration, etc. I think once you have that view, then sort of a lot of things may feel like AI problems because they happen very shortly after you build AI. Like your AI builds new AI systems, your site keeps changing. Anyway, so overall, maybe you're getting more up to like 50-50 chance of doom shortly after you have AI systems that are human level. But
so for 25 weeks, I have been saying to you, don't believe me. Believe the CEOs of the big AI companies when they tell you their work has a very high percentage chance that it kills you, your family, and everyone you've ever met. But it just got harder to deny. Don't believe me if you don't want to. Don't believe the CEOs of the big AI companies if you don't want to. Believe the head of the first ever U.S. AI Safety Institute. He openly says AI has a 50% chance of killing you and your family. This seems like a pretty fucking big deal to me. But today's guest on For Humanity would disagree with Paul Christiano about AI taking over and killing us all. In fact, although our guest advocates strongly for a full stop to AI capabilities advancement, it's not because of concern over extinction risk. Today's guest is Dr. Emile Torres, a philosopher and historian whose work focuses on existential threats to civilization and humanity. Dr. Torres has published on a wide range of topics, including machine superintelligence, emerging technologies and religion, as well as the history of ethics of human extinction, including the recent book, Human Extinction, A History of the Science and Ethics of Annihilation. So Dr. Torres believes that AI is really, really bad and that we should stop altogether, but not for the reasons that I think. Dr. Torres thinks the AI safety movement has it all wrong, both in principle and in practice. Here is my interview with Dr. Emile P. Torres.
I still can't hear you. Technology. God damn it.
How about now?
I can hear you. Yes.
You can hear me?
I can. Yes.
You can hear me?
Yep.
Oh my God. But you can hear me and you can see me?
Both.
Amazing. All right. Excellent. It's always something. Awesome. I feel like, if you have 5 Zooms a day, if one of them starts without drama, you're winning.
Right. Very sympathetic.
I read a couple of your articles online, and I was just super impressed and wanted to get you on here and talk. So just maybe start out by sort of introducing yourself, who you are, what you do, and how it relates to the subject of this show, which is AI X risk.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so over the past 10 plus years, I've worked on threats to humanity and civilization. A lot of this work in the past has specifically focused on existential risk. But more recently, I've sort of become a bit critical of the existential risk framework, although I am still deeply concerned about these global scale threats from emerging technologies. Just approach it from a slightly different perspective. So that's my work. My last book focused on the history of thinking about human extinction in the Western tradition, from the pre-Socratics even some traditions before the pre-Socratics all the way up to the present, and then thinking about the ethics of human extinction as well. So
I'm fascinated by all these things. Yeah. So I mean, I guess let's just start out with human extinction in general. There's the guy walking around, the meme of the guy walking around with the sign, "The end is near." I guess humans have been endeavoring to talk about extinction for a really long time. What is your perspective on sort of the history of extinction chatter among humans?
Yeah, great question. I think this idea of human extinction, whereby, so first of all, it might be useful to point out that human extinction doesn't have a single definition, right? It's actually a really ambiguous term. So, for example, I think the most common notion of human extinction is where our species dies out, the population dwindles to zero, and that remains the case forever, and we don't have any successors. So that's actually kind of a complicated definition because there are a bunch of additional conditions that have to be satisfied. There are different definitions of humanity. So to back up with respect to extinction real fast, I mean, another way that we could go extinct is by evolving into something new, right? I mean, past species like Homo heidelbergensis or the Neanderthals and so on, maybe the populations didn't just like die out, but I mean, Homo heidelbergensis became us. And several other species, Homo neanderthalensis, interbreeded with us. So there are different ways of going extinct. We very well could evolve into something completely new as a result of natural evolutionary mechanisms or because of cyborgization. So that's another way we could go extinct. But there's also this important definition of, important question that concerns the definition of humanity. And so this gets at, I think, a really crucial issue that is resulting in contemporary conversations about human extinction and being sort of muddled. So a lot of futurists define humanity as Homo sapiens, our species, and whatever descendants we might have in the future, so long as they have a certain moral status, they're intelligent like we are, and so on.
Yeah.
So an implication of that is that our species could die out, maybe in the next decade, maybe violently, without human extinction having occurred. So, another type of human extinction is so consider Hans Moravec, for example, this early transhumanist who's been hugely influential within the modern transhumanist movement. He has a view that's very similar to the effective accelerationists, which is that it's really important that our species survives, but only long enough for us to create these machinic replacements. So our mind children, as he put them, AIs that can take our place in the universe. Larry Page, co-founder of Google, also has this basic view. So from his perspective, human extinction will, so why these people would consider these future beings to be instances of humans. So human extinction won't have occurred if we are replaced by machines in the near future. So long as these machines exist and they're, sufficiently intelligent and they go off and colonize space and so on, then we would have avoided human extinction. So sorry, this is very long-winded, but and maybe I could have articulated the point better, but I just feel like, many of the people who are the most vocal about avoiding human extinction, including in the AGI discussion, are actually kind of for a type of human extinction. A lot of them would be okay if we die out, maybe even in the near future, maybe in an involuntary manner, so long as there are these AI post-humans that carry on civilization and colonize space and so on.
Yeah, all right. Definitely a lot in there. And so one thing I just want to say as a frame for our whole conversation is I'm trying to make this show for the general public, right? And so I try to, anytime we bring in something that sounds really academic or sort of dense, I want to sort of unpack it a little bit. So just tell me about transhumanism. Give me a second grade definition of transhumanism itself.
Yeah, sure. So transhumanism is the idea that we should use advanced technologies to re-engineer the human organism. In order to create a new post-human species. And the heart of the transhumanist ideology, which really goes back to the early 1900s, is this utopian vision of the future. Like, well, what happened in the early 1900s? Well, the previous century, Christianity declined in the West. And consequently, it left this enormous void, this vacuum. And there was nothing to fill it. So before, we had Christianity to give us meaning and purpose in life, to give us a kind of hope. Well, academics would say eschatological hope about the future of humanity. Eventually there's going to be cosmic justice and we'll live in paradise forever. All of that was gone. And so people were sort of scrambling for new ideologies to fill that void. And transhumanism was one of them. So it also, just like traditional religion, offers the hope, the promise of utopia. But rather than relying on supernatural agency, God, and so on, we must rely on ourselves. So we develop this science and technology, re-engineer ourselves, and create a utopian life in this world, not the other world. In this life, not the afterlife.
And all of this started way before we have any of the current technical means of even envisioning this, right? This was in, what kind of technology environment was the idea of transhumanism born from?
Yeah, so, I mean, I would say initially, a lot of the early transhumanists, they imagined improving the human condition basically through traditional eugenic methods. So this would be like selective breeding. Some of them were okay with, some of them were okay with things like forced sterilization, but there was just this general view that what you need is to, in accordance with Darwin's notion of natural selection, whereby individuals that reproduce more, they pass their traits on to the next generation, and consequently those traits will increase their prevalence in the population. So you want the best people, the geniuses and so on, to have more children, and the people who aren't geniuses to have fewer children. So that was sort of the technology that was initially proposed to realize the transhumanist vision. And then it was really in after the second half of the 20th century, in particular like the 1970s, 1980s, when people started to realize actually there are emerging technology like genetic engineering. 1980s is when the first serious speculations about nanotechnology were articulated by a guy named Eric Drexler. And there was also talk about AI. So that's when there was sort of this pivot from like, actually, maybe we don't need to lean into this transgenerational process of selection, of selective breeding, and actually just on an individual basis within a single lifetime, we could use these advanced technologies to radically modify ourselves, to create this post-human species, and by doing that, to replace the human condition with this much more superior post-human condition that would be sort of utopian in nature.
Right.
Yeah.
So utopian. All the robots can be utopian with each other. It'd be so great.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think initially the thought was that this post-human species would be us, but transformed. A more radical interpretation of that is that the post-human species might just be completely separate. So you and I, we cease to exist and are just replaced by this new post-human species, whereas other transhumanists really emphasize that it should be a transition whereby I get to live forever. I get to become super intelligent by, through genetic engineering or plugging my brain into a computer or whatever, or uploading my mind. So those are sort of two different visions. One is a bit more radical than the other, because obviously just, if AI, machines replace us, that's different than us becoming the machines, merging with the machines and so on. But ultimately both are unified in envisioning a future in which our species, pretty much doesn't exist.
Yeah. Okay. And so I see a world where there are these sort of pro-extinctionists, and they're certainly in the sort of like acceleration camp, I would say now. But what you talk about is something even deeper and almost insidious, and that is people in the AI risk awareness community, people in the AI safety community who actually have these designs in their heads as well. Tell me about that. And I don't know if you want to name names or any organizations or anything, but like who is saying they're opposed to extinction, who really is pro-extinction?
Yeah, great question. First thing to notice, I think, is in terms of like the landscape of the whole AI discussion right now, you've got AI ethics on one side. These people, I would consider myself to mostly fall into the AI ethics camp at this point, although I used to be AI safety. And AI ethics is really concerned with the less speculative, near-term or long-term threats posed by AI. AI safety, this is a field of study that really emerged out of the transhumanist movement. And so its sort of underpinnings are deeply transhumanistic. And the reason that it emerged was because in the 1990s, as modern transhumanism was gaining steam and there were a growing number of people who were starting to identify as transhumanists, this is when movements like extropianism, an early version of transhumanism, became sort of salient on the cultural landscape, as it were. But also the World Transhumanist Association was founded by Nick Bostrom and so on. I mentioned that because from the beginning, AI was sort of seen as playing an important role in transitioning us towards this post-human realm, this post-human era. But by the late 90s, early 2000s, there were people like Eliezer Yudkowsky, for example, who were in this movement and started to think, actually, maybe the default outcome of creating advanced AI is not utopia, maybe it's doom. Actually, maybe the problem of getting the AI to deliver us to this utopian world where we all get to live forever, we colonize space and so on. Maybe actually getting it to do that is much more complicated and perilous than people previously thought. So just an interesting historical development that I think is useful for thinking about this was in the year 2000, on April 1st, as it happens, April Fool's Day, a guy named Bill Joy, who's the co-founder of Sun Microsystems, published an article in Wired magazine in which he argued that these advanced genetic, nanotechnology, and robotics or AI technologies, GNR technologies, are so dangerous that we should not build them. And basically the transhumanists sort of chuckled at that and said, that's not an option. There's only one way forward. Because if we don't develop these technologies, we will never get to techno-utopia. So we have to develop them. What was their response? It was to found a new field called existential risk studies. So that was the specific aim, was to study the ways that these technologies could go wrong so that we could benefit from all of the utopian possibilities while mitigating, these annihilatory possibilities. Yeah.
And I just want to stop here. So this is something that makes me crazy about this whole debate of like acceleration versus safety versus, nobody, literally nobody is saying full stop versus full go. It's just a question of how fast we go. This is not a stop or go debate. This is a what speed should we go? Should we drive on the Beltway at 900 miles an hour? Or should we maybe, I don't know, go 80 or 90 or 110 if we're feeling crazy and it feels like we're going 900 and that's the choice. It's 900 or 0.
Yeah. So I completely agree with that. I mean, there was a person on Twitter, now called X, who asked not that long ago, what do you call what you call someone who wants to accelerate all domains of technology, with the exception of advanced AI and maybe like advanced nanotechnology and one or two other particular types of technology. What do you call someone who wants to accelerate all technology but those? And one of the people who responded was Rob Bensinger, who works for Eliezer Yudkowsky at the Machine Intelligence Research Institute based in Berkeley. And his response was doomer. So, I mean, the doomers like Yudkowsky and so on, they want AGI and they want machine superintelligence as soon as possible. They just think that we're not prepared for it yet. So what they want is AI safety research to lead the way, with AI capabilities research trailing behind. And if you cross the AGI finish line in that configuration, then you get utopia. Because by definition, if you've solved the AI control problem from their perspective, then you have a superintelligence that can enable you to live forever, colonize space, and so on.
Right. I believe that. Do you believe that? Do you believe that it's sort of like if it's just a question of order or inverse order?
Yeah. So I mean, my feeling is that I think AI safety is thinking about the issue in the wrong way. Because really, I mean, a lot of these people in the field, certainly the founders of the field, were transhumanists who had this kind of techno-utopian vision of the future. That vision of the future, in my judgment, I used to be very enthusiastic about this techno-utopian worldview. But more recently, I've come to think that actually it's pretty impoverished. And I think that if their version of utopia were fully realized, that itself would be catastrophic for most of humanity. Because one of the really striking things about that whole literature is that there is basically no reference to what the future could or should look like from the perspectives of other cultures around the world. From the perspectives of indigenous communities or Islam. I mean, Islam, the number of religiously unaffiliated people in the world is declining. The foreseeable future is more religion in the world. Religion is growing. So I just don't think you can be a serious futurist and just ignore that fact. I'm an atheist, but as a futurist who wants to be, to think seriously about what the future should look like, I can't just ignore the fact that there's going to be 2 billion Muslims or just below 2 billion Muslims by 2050. And so my point is that, underlying the field of AI safety is this vision of the future that I think is just, it's not something we should aim for. And I'm really worried about what happens if we have advanced AI systems that are misaligned. But also, I'm very worried about what happens if we have advanced AI systems that are aligned. Because, the people in charge are, it's clear that companies like OpenAI do not care about most of humanity, right? I mean, from worker exploitation, paying Kenyan workers $1.32 an hour, to all the intellectual property theft and so on. If they cared about humanity, you would see evidence of that in their actions. We see the opposite. So there's no reason to think that once they have this extremely powerful technology, suddenly they're going to say, oh, yeah, everybody should benefit from this. No, I think the outcome of an aligned AI, that itself is going to be catastrophic. So the whole AI safety approach, I think, is wrong. And I personally am much more sympathetic with this stop AI movement that I think a friend of mine, Remelt Ellen, and some others are trying to get off the ground. I'm much more sympathetic with that.
And what is it? It's calling for a full stop. Tell me,
yes.
Distinct that from the current AI safety movement.
Yeah. So within AI safety, you have a variety of opinions. There are some people like the accelerationists who think AI safety is a silly topic of study because the default outcome will be good. The risks of AGI are very low. And anyway, the ways the free market is going to solve everything. Of course, yes. within AI safety, you have some people who are like extremely worried, other people who are sort of, less concerned. The people who are extremely worried, like Émile Torres, who, thinks there's a 99% chance of annihilation if an AGI is built within the foreseeable future. Their view is that consequently, we just need to pause capabilities research. To give, capabilities research is all the way over here. We need to
Pause the frontier edge. Like, just stop the frontier stuff. That's what that's what my brain tells me is good. But tell me what you're thinking.
Yeah. So, I think that superficially resembles my view, but if you scratch below the surface, I think there are pretty significant differences. Because again, their main concern is not like creating AIs that might replace us or radically transform the human condition, perhaps in the near future. It's that the AIs might be misaligned and kill everyone and not be worthy of the name humanity. So I could have said that better, but the key idea is that from my perspective, I think now is a crucial moment where we need to take a step back and think seriously about what exactly we want the future to look like. The transhumanists, a lot of the AI safety people, they have an answer to that, which is that we merge with technology, perhaps even technology just completely replaces us, we upload our minds, and so on. From my perspective, I'm not sure that that is the best outcome. And I worry that that outcome might, as I was gesturing out before, might be really catastrophic. So that leads me to want to say, let's stop these advanced, stop building these increasingly advanced large language models on the frontier. And we need to pause and seriously think about like what a good future looks like for all people on Earth. And not just, the vision of transhumanism is basically just techno-capitalism, extended on steroids. And like,
right.
And it reflects a lot of the particular values of just as a matter of fact, like the overwhelmingly white male people who came up with this vision. But there are other visions out there. And, I think it's important to take them seriously, and maybe they differ in like fundamental ways. And so I feel like we're at a point where it's like, if there is the possibility of transformative AI, stop it indefinitely. Why? Not because we want AI safety research to catch up to capabilities research, but rather we should want to reflect a lot more carefully and deeply about what it is we want the future to look like, given that we may be on the verge of, radically transforming humanity, of creating AIs that are potentially, might potentially replace all economically valuable jobs in the world. So that's sort of my view.
Okay.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally makes sense. And it's almost like we would use the same tool, but for different reasons, right? Like I would go full pause on, frontier capabilities development. I would do it to give safety a chance to catch up. But I think your argument makes a whole lot of sense, and makes a whole lot of sense as you sort of try to make the case for a pause generally. Something that a conversation I have a lot with people in the AI safety community is like, if we want to not have everyone die, and we believe extinction is how that's going to happen, but we think that, say, job loss is a more effective case to more people immediately, should we argue for job loss as a means to get to extinction talk, right? And extinction prevention. So I sort of feel like you've wrapped the whole thing into one big tent where it is job loss and terrorism and extinction and basically all the bad things that could happen, plus the ethical concerns of like, is it just being made to sort of mirror the people who've made it? And what about other cultures and people and genders and all these kinds of things, right? You've sort of like roped the whole thing in.
Yeah. So that's a fantastic summary, more succinct than a summary I could give. Thank you. But I would also say that, another criticism that I would make of AI safety is that I think a lot of their concerns are ultimately a distraction. But let me, qualify this, because I think your worries actually do align with mine, but maybe we approach it from a slightly different angle. So a lot of the, this worry about human extinction, for example. So first of all, we've already established that human extinction is ambiguous, and a lot of the people who are worried about a certain type of extinction are also kind of for another type of human extinction, whereby we're replaced or we become or transformed into this new, a completely new post-human species that is fundamentally different from us. Maybe that would happen in a decade, maybe this century. So a lot of these people are for a kind of extinction. So, yes, I would say that the concerns about annihilation, like there being this AI system that turns on its creators and kills everyone on Earth, I think a lot of those claims are not based on good arguments. So I used to think, sure, I used to think that they were based on good arguments. But, these, so I would point viewers to several articles, for example. So there was one written by this statistician, Swedish statistician named Ole Hagström a couple years ago. I think he just had published a new book on this very topic. But anyways, he pointed out that there actually there are some complications, some problems with crucial premises in the argument for AGI X risk that nobody's really pointed out, that nobody's really noticed before. So actually the orthogonality thesis, that's one of the premises, and the instrumental convergence thesis, that's another major premise. They're quite limited. So, okay.
And just let's just define those if we can, ever so briefly. I think I understand that, but I'd love to hear what you think both of those are.
Sure. The orthogonality thesis is basically the claim that intelligence and goals are orthogonal axes, and that AI systems can vary within that space freely. So, sorry, to make it a bit more concrete, you could have a machine that is super intelligent is compatible with goals that we might find to be like ridiculous, like maximizing the total number of paper clips in the universe, or counting the blades of grass on your, on college campus or something. Like those are recognized as silly goals, but goals and cognitive capability, those are just, they can be combined in all sorts of different ways. So that's the orthogonality thesis. And that's important because it's for precisely the reason that the paperclip maximizer scenario was proposed. Like you could have a superintelligence that just wants to maximize paperclips, which leads to the instrumental convergence thesis, which is the idea that any sufficiently intelligent system with a wide variety of final goals. So final goal might be maximize happiness in the universe, count the number of blades on college campus, maximize paper clips, cure cancer, and so on.
Win at chess.
Win at chess, exactly. That for a huge variety of these final goals, a sufficiently intelligent system will converge upon a finite set of intermediate goals. So if you want to play chess better, if you want to cure cancer and so on, you're going to want to acquire as many resources as possible. The more resources you have, then better you can play. You're going to want to increase your intellectual ability.
Right.
This, quote unquote,
these are the basic ideas that like an AI system would want to gather power and not die and protect itself, right? That it would sort of, do these basic defensive measures that would put us on opposite footing from us, and it's superior to us, so it wins.
Exactly. And so, if you give the AI the final goal of making coffee, And then you decide, actually, you know what, I'm just going to unplug it. The AI, if it's sufficiently smart, is going to see you unplug it and go, if you shut me down, then I can't fulfill my task. So I'm going to prevent you. So self-preservation is yet another one of these instrumental values or goals that these systems are going to converge on.
Right. And so much of AI safety is based on these sort of fundamental principles. You are saying that those are off, that is not how it would be, you think?
Yeah. So Ole Hagstrom has some really insightful arguments for why actually these are pretty limited. And one of his conclusions, so again, I haven't read his book, so perhaps he elaborates on these ideas. One of his conclusions in the paper is, if I have noticed these and they're rather significant and nobody else has noticed them, what else are we missing? What other potential limitations? And, maybe these premises aren't quite as powerful as people thought. So, but another premise is this idea of recursive self-improvement, which ties into instrumental conversions. Because I had mentioned before, if you want to better achieve your final goals, whatever they are, the smarter, the better able you are at processing information, then you'll put yourself in a better position to realize those final goals. So this is why people worry that an AI system is going to recursively self-improve. And consequently, you have, since designing intelligent machines is an intellectual task, if you have a system that's smarter than us, it'll be better positioned to design an even smarter machine, and so on. And then maybe over course of months or perhaps seconds, you go from having a system that is human level to one that is massively super intelligent.
And they almost need this, right? Like to achieve the massive utopian goals that they've set out, they need this. Like human intelligence is not going to get us there, so they need it to like recursively self-improve a billion times so it gets better, right?
So absolutely, it ties into that issue exactly. So I mean, if we have a superintelligence that is controllable, if it recursively self-improves, that would be great.
Right.
Because it's better to have
win-win. Yes.
A win-win. Yeah, because obviously it's better to have a super intelligent system than a merely super intelligent system.
Right. You go to sleep and you wake up and it's smarter. It was doing the dishes when you went to sleep, and now it's writing your PhD thesis when you wake up or something.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if the AI runs, I calculated this once, the average PhD in the US in the humanities, I believe, is 8.2 years, which is a really long time. And if the AI system is running 1 million times faster than our brains do, and doesn't need to sleep, that's the equivalent of, I think it was something like 4.2 minutes. So, okay, like 4.2 minutes it gets, so the reason I mentioned this idea of recursive self-improvement, which also sometimes goes by the term singularity, in intelligence explosion, is that this too, I think is quite problematic. And probably the best paper I've read on this topic was just published by a guy named David Thorstad, a philosopher. So it also really, I'd recommend that for viewers to go read, because it provides like a pretty compelling case that actually, I mean, there are all sorts of assumptions built into this idea, like that, a more intelligent system will be better able to design more intelligent systems, and maybe that's not the case. Maybe they're diminishing returns. It could be the case that like once we get to like slightly above human level, the curve flattens pretty quickly. But also resources, you need a lot of energy and so on to build these increasingly powerful systems. So there are constraints with respect to that. And ultimately, Thorstad argues that this singularity claim that Yudkowsky and others make, I mean, it is an extraordinary claim, which is fine. It just requires extraordinary evidence. And there's no extraordinary evidence for it. So that's another premise and a premise that I think is problematic. And maybe one last, if I may ramble on for just another minute. Also, there's this question of how exactly superintelligence would kill everyone on Earth. So that's the claim, that it will do this, but how? So on the one hand, you've got orthogonality thesis, instrumental convergence thesis, and the recursive self-improvement thesis, which are all problematic, there's this extra claim, like, even if all of that's right, how exactly does the superintelligence kill us? Nobody has any good thoughts about that. I mean, Nick Bostrom in his book from 2014, Superintelligence, talks about how the AI might hack into laboratory equipment around the world and use advanced nanotechnology to synthesize, to manufacture these mosquito-sized killer robots that urging for, as he says, maybe Yudkowsky talks about maybe the AI will infect us with a synthetic pathogen that enables the AI to control our minds. And when it was pointed out to him that actually wouldn't kill everyone, that would be some kind of dystopia. But when he said, well, maybe it'll synthesize it'll create these diamondoid bacteria, which don't exist, but maybe hypothetically could exist, and it'll release these into the atmosphere, and then they'll self-replicate in the atmosphere, blot out the sun. He never really explains what happens once the sun is blotted out, because the AI needs energy, and the sun is, is a source of most of the energy on Earth. So, like, okay, there's just all of this starts to look like, the argument for AI causing human extinction involves a whole lot of different premises. So we only mentioned a few, but there are several others. The more premises you have in an argument, the more ways that argument could go wrong. So a priori, the lower the probability is that argument is true.
But couldn't you, if you tried to say someone, make me the good case, that it's like going to go fine and none of the bad things are going to happen, isn't that an equally difficult argument to make?
So I don't think so. Okay. Great question. But what I would say is that several things come to mind. One is that I think the burden of proof is on people making these extraordinary claims that AI is going to suddenly recursively self-improve. It's going to, synthesize diamondoid bacteria that flood the atmosphere and block out the sun and so on. Those are extraordinary.
I don't know. But shouldn't the burden be on the maker of the product? Like, if you make a pharmaceutical, it has to be proven safe before you put it in the water supply. Like, isn't the burden on the companies?
Yes. So this gets at my view, which is that AI, I think, these advanced AI systems are profoundly dangerous. I'm not so worried about them killing everyone on Earth, because it is really hard to kill everyone on Earth, right? There have been some actual studies on this where people have just tried to come up with scenarios involving advanced technology where literally everybody on Earth dies. And one of the takeaways of these studies is that that's much harder than it's one might initially think. 8+ billion people.
But just a pin in, I'd put in that as considered by humans, right? Like, a thing to me about all this is like, the limits of our imagination are not the limits of what is possible. And if you think about something 1,000 times smarter than us, like, it's like my dog looking at me typing on the computer, like, it realizes that, like, I'll pet it and like whatever. But when I'm typing and writing a paper or something, like, it doesn't know what I'm thinking about, how I'm approaching it, any of that sort of framework. So the idea that, like, humans today can meaningfully assess what something 1,000 times smarter would do seems a little off to me, just on the headline.
Yeah, so I agree with that. And I think the analogy between humans and dogs can be very useful. But I would say that on the one hand, we don't know if we can even build a system that is human or beyond human level. And even if we do we have good reason for thinking that is going to result in a system that is even more intelligent? I mean, even beyond that, this notion of intelligence is just not very well defined. The whole thing is just very murky. And, people in the AGI field themselves, like, will acknowledge that a lot of the people in the AI safety field have a particular understanding of intelligence. And but even individuals like Shane Legg, the co-founder of DeepMind, I mean, he published this article back in, I think, 2007, where he basically just compiled a bunch of definitions from the scientific literature of what intelligence is. And his takeaway was like, nobody agrees. Like, some people define it as the ability to learn, others have, has to do with the capacity to acquire effective means to achieve one's ends, and so on and so on. There's just thousands of definitions out there. But so ultimately, I would say that my claim would be that we can get we should worry about global catastrophic risks associated with AI that have nothing to do with all of the arguments that the AI safety people make. Right now, for example, there's major concerns about disinformation, right? Oppressive regimes being able to manufacture propaganda using advanced AI. I think it was the World Economic Forum recently identified AI-generated disinformation as the number one most immediate threat facing humanity in front of climate change. And so the reason I would say this is disinformation, if there is disinformation about, for example, climate change, that could have absolutely catastrophic consequences. Jerry Lanier, the computer scientist,
if there's disinformation about climate change, my God, what a world would that be?
Okay, yes, I should have said that. If AI supercharges disinformation about climate change, Jerry Lanier said at the end of in his interview for the documentary The Social Dilemma, if I remember correctly, he said that he thinks that social media is an existential threat to civilization. I agree, and so, but if one agrees with that, or if one is at least a little sympathetic with that claim, then look at AI. AI has the potential to wreak havoc in our information environment. And climate change is a genuine threat to civilization. A lot of people who don't sit around and read the climate change literature like I do, are just unaware of how devastating it's going to be. There is an existential threat that involves a very straight, short line between AI and climate catastrophe that doesn't require these, deeply problematic premises and a whole bunch of them to make these claims about how AI is going to, kill everyone on Earth. No, there's a straightforward way that these advanced AI systems could be absolutely catastrophic. And this is just one example, disinformation relating to climate change getting really bad, billions of people dying, 2 billion climate refugees this century. Think about the mayhem.
When I think about climate change, I always think about the timelines, right? And so I have been concerned about climate change my whole life. I was 3 years ago, I was extremely concerned about it, and then I sort of became aware of the whole AI safety thing, and I think that AI risk is a 2 to 10 year problem, and we will either get to the end, extinction, or some sort of really rough transition into maybe a positive future within that time, and that climate is a 20 to 50 to 100 year problem, and that if we can make it 20 years, AGI will come up with new technology using new physics that we don't know about to solve climate change. So I've actually stepped climate change way down my list of concerns as I've moved AI X risk up.
Yeah, I mean, my thought about this is, so I've met many people in the AI safety community over the years who have expressed that exact view. So this is just my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, and feel free to tell me if you think I'm wrong. But I feel like that view exemplifies the problems with a kind of utopian thinking. Climate change is just this technical problem. We just need better technology, and this magical, to quote Sam Altman, this magical intelligence in the sky. Once we create it, if it doesn't destroy us, then we can just delegate it the task of coming up with like inventing a new technology that at scale removes carbon dioxide from the atmosphere.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe not. But I certainly wouldn't. The history of technological forecasts and predictions is so abysmal. I certainly wouldn't count on us being able to create a superintelligence that can just solve, climate change. Also, I would add that, my own view is that I don't think we're that close to AGI, however one defines that, because again, there's no agreed upon definition. I think these large, so I guess my view aligns to some extent with that of Gary Marcus, where I think, this is the way I would put it. I think people like Yudkowsky are looking backwards and saying, look at how far we've come, over the past couple decades. But what they don't realize is that they're on an off ramp. And so, if they were to pivot and look forwards, they realize they're actually not, that much closer to their final destination, which is superintelligence. So I think that the large language models, in Gary Marcus's view, well, I hope I'm not misrepresenting it, but I believe it's that, we're really going to need some major breakthroughs that aren't just scaling these large language models up more and more. I mean, Sam Altman himself says that we need an energy breakthrough to reach AGI, true AGI or superintelligence or something.
It's such an interesting question. I was listening to Dario Amodei on Ezra Klein's podcast yesterday talking about this, a new interview, and he basically makes the case that arguably we're there now, that he doesn't like the term AGI, but if you really want to push him on it, he believes that you could make a credible case that we've already arrived at it, and he doesn't think there will need to be any fundamental changes, that scaling, if you 10x the frontier models now and then 10x them again and 10x them again, you will continue to get these exponential, curve growth. And so I don't know. You're absolutely right. Like, all of the experts are all over the map on it. And so that leaves non-experts to be like, what the hell? If these guys, even the guys on team safety aren't together, the guys on the CEOs aren't together, what is anyone supposed to make of this thing? So I assume you and I are aligned on wanting the general public to wake up, wanting the general public to start to understand this stuff and to start to take action and be involved. I think that getting the general public involved is critically important. But how do we get them involved if there's literally 100 different messages from 100 different mouthpieces and none of it matches up?
Yeah, I mean, a challenging question. The first thing I would say, though, is if Dario is right and we have AGI now, then people should breathe a huge sigh of relief, right? Because the claim for years and years, really the claim basically going back to the 1960s or late 1950s was that if we get human level intelligence, then we get superintelligence, because of that recursive self-improvement. Instrumental convergence will kick in, these AI systems will. So, okay, if we have AGI, then a crucial premise in Yudkowsky's argument is not true. Because he has been saying for the longest time that once we get human level, it's going to take over.
Well,
yeah,
actually, he does say that it could be here and be disguising itself for up to 20 or 30 years, and that it wouldn't reveal itself until it was assured success. So there could be a period that could be long where it's here, it's doing bad things, it's not showing us what it's doing, and then ta-da.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, but also that's just, there's I would put that in the same category of worries. It's just not a very plausible concern. It could be the case that next time you sneeze, the universe is annihilated. Well, why? That's obviously silly. No, actually, there's physics that we don't understand. And if you did understand it, then you'd realize there's a causal concatenation that leads from your sneezing. So you come up with a story to sort of make to make some of these claims sort of like frightening. But are they really plausible? I don't know. I mean, yeah, maybe the AI. I mean, for all I know, the AI system is right now plotting a way to make everybody happy on Earth. And that's its secret ploy. And at some point, it'll burst forth and say, but
that seems to be like the
not.
least likely outcome, right? That like it seems to me like there's one species in the entire galaxy that has our goals, and it's us. And that if we put, dogs in charge of the Earth today, we'd all be dead by tonight. And they were 1,000 times smarter than us, because we'd all be dog food or we'd all be tennis balls. Like whatever their goal would be, it would not be ours. It would not be having ice cream stores and jobs and TV cameras and whatever the hell else dumb shit we do. Like they would do their own thing. So I don't know. I don't get to the point where I can ever see an AGI system like wanting exactly what we want because we told it so. Like that seems really implausible to me.
I think part of the issue, so this gets back to my criticism of the AI safety field, is when it comes to these arguments, there is a lot of reference, a lot of use of the word seems. This seems like, it seems like this would be the case. It's not very scientific. It's not very well grounded. Some people have intuitions that this argument is good. Other people have intuitions that the argument's not good. A lot of the AI safety research is not peer reviewed, and like kind of for a reason, because most reviewers look at these arguments, go like, it's just so many moving parts, and there's so many ways that the argument itself could go wrong. And this gets back to my claim that there are catastrophic risks posed by these advanced AI systems that don't rely on all of this like seems or that is really well grounded, and also it has nothing to do with this community of individuals who are enthusiastic and anxious about AI in the first place because of their techno-utopian visions. Most of the leading doomers, not only are they accelerationists with respect to just about all technologies, but the exception being AGI, most notable exception at least. But I mean, they were AI accelerationists in the beginning. And, Sam Altman has said that Yudkowsky is the reason he got into AI in the first place. So there's also, I know this point is a bit tangential to what I was saying before, but it's just maybe worth noting a bit of an irony of the whole situation, which is that some of the people who are most worried about AI are exactly the people who are responsible for laying the groundwork for the AGI race in the first place. And
I was just saying, isn't it true on both sides though, that because this is so speculative, right? The good case and the bad case is complete speculation because it's entirely novel to, human experience. It seems like saying it's speculative is blunted on both sides because it's required to make any case on either side. You know what I mean? So it doesn't seem to me that being like, that's super speculative, or they say seems, or that kind of stuff, like it all seems because none of it is. How do we get around that on both sides?
Yeah, great question. And so just to be clear, I would say I'm on neither of those sides, right? I mean, those are people within the sort of AI tradition. I mean, that's sort of the tradition that came out of transhumanism and that has been hugely influential within the AGI race. Some people are saying, the acceleration is saying we need to, pedal to the metal because the default outcome is going to be utopia. We get to live forever. We get infinite energy. That Sam Altman has said that we get to colonize space and so on. And then, you got the other people who are saying, no, if we build godlike AI, then this godlike AI will be a demon, to borrow Elon Musk's term. And so all of that, from my perspective, it's like what we should be doing. It's sort of a meta position. Question that entire narrative, that entire tradition of thinking that has given rise to these companies. Take a step back, ask if trying to build machines that are more intelligent than us, thereby radically transforming the condition of life on Earth, if that's even something we should be pursuing in the first place. And that's my pause AI position. Take a step back, seriously think about what OpenAI likes to talk about. Oh, we're doing this for the benefit of all of humanity. Absolute bullshit. I mentioned before that they have a record already of harming a lot of people on the road to creating these superintelligent machines, but also like there's just no evidence that they actually care about what people in other cultures, in Nigeria, in South America, people who are religious, people who are non-religious, there's just no serious consideration about, no serious thought or reflection about what it means to be benefiting all of humanity in the first place. And so this is sort of my critique of the whole AI safety community, as well as, and relatedly, this race to build AGI. On the one hand, the whole narrative is wrong, in my opinion. Their whole vision of utopia is deeply problematic. And then two, they're talking about these wildly speculative risks based on this idea of singularity, of orthogonality thesis, and so on, which, again, I would recommend people read the papers that critique those, because it's all deeply problematic. Whereas, from my perspective, there are really good, very robust arguments to make that these advanced AI systems could be catastrophic, and disinformation, already intellectual property theft, job loss. These are trivial issues, the environmental consequence of them. These are very serious issues that themselves could push civilization into a state of ruination.
It's amazing how we end up at the same place, but we're taking entirely different routes to get there. But I'll take it. Like, I want more people at the same place, and I'll go one further. I hope you're right? Like, I really hope that all the extinction stuff is as far off as you're saying it is. Here's a question I have for you. Obviously, you have, Eliezer and that. Where do you come in with like a Jeffrey Hinton or a Yoshua Bengio or, some of these converts who, where is Jeffrey Hinton off?
Yeah. Good question.
Because they didn't start in that origin place that you're talking about, right?
Right. Yeah. So I have watched many interviews with Hinton. I've never really seen him discuss in detail why he thinks that AI could kill everyone on Earth. My guess is that he's not that familiar with the literature. Maybe that's why he only recently started talking about this. And if that's the case, then he probably also isn't familiar with like some of the papers I mentioned before, like, the potential problems with this notion of intelligence explosion. And so, yeah, I'm not.
I think his primary approach is like at a goals, sub-goals level. It's like, if you give a system goals, it will make sub-goals, and if it's not aligned, those sub-goals might just kill you. Just that simply.
Right. So that view I'm sympathetic with. That could fall within the category of unintended consequences of these technologies. And unintended consequences are sort of, are thematic in the history of technology, right? We create these technologies. We invented, introduced gas-powered cars to solve pollution in cities. That was one of it was celebrated. Turns out, CFCs, destroying the ozone and so on and so on. There's just a million examples. So is it possible that as we create a technology that is unique in that it has a kind of agency in its own right, which these systems already do, and is increasingly integrated in every corner of our civilization, influencing the economy, driving our cars and operating on patients in hospitals and so on and so on. Could there be unintended consequences where it just behaves in a way that we did not anticipate, maybe because of a kind of sub-goal? And so on. Absolutely. I'm very worried about that. It's not clear to me that is going to, there's any plausible way that could result in everybody on Earth dying for all the reasons I mentioned before. Diamondoid bacteria, there's just no good kill mechanism.
What about what about if you take Ebola and you make it, 10 times more contagious and more deadly? You take existing human disease and you just tweak it.
How do you distribute that? You're also going to
wouldn't need to distribute a ton, right? You set the fire, and if the propellant is strong enough, the whole thing will burn.
Yeah, so you'd have
saw
to,
with COVID.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to make sure that it was not detectable. I mean, there are other properties you'd have to code into it, which we don't even know if you can engineer a pathogen that does, it is contagious as a common cold, as lethal as rabies, as incurable as Ebola, and maybe has the incubation period of HIV. Okay, so that's because all of these genes have different trade-offs. I mean, it's not a simple issue. It's really, really difficult to design a pathogen like that really could potentially be a global pandemic that risks human extinction.
So you think that something that's 1,000 times smarter than us, if it's able to, you take all the known diseases, it picks those apart, and it's trying to come up with a new one that is much stronger and more deadly. It seems to me like a layup for 1,000 times smarter system to just take the existing diseases, make a few adjustments, and make them much more hellish for us. That does not seem hard.
I think part of the issue is that it's hard to make sense of 1,000 times smarter, right? Because smarter could mean many different things in this context. On the one hand, perhaps it has to do with information processing speed. On the other hand, another way to think about the human mind is as simplifying a bit, but as a cluster of mechanisms that generate concepts. And what are concepts? Concepts are mental representations of aspects of the world, right? So one difference between us and the dog is that we have certain concept generating mechanisms that the dog doesn't have. So there's no amount of time that you could spend with the dog to get it to ever understand nuclear chain reaction, right? It just doesn't have the concept generating mechanisms necessary to have the concept of atom, chain reaction and so on. So we have no idea what the ceiling is with respect to this. So maybe, here's one possibility. You could have a superintelligence that is just quantitatively superintelligent. Maybe it doesn't have access to any more concepts than we do, but it could just process information much faster. Maybe it's qualitatively different, and it has access to, maybe there's this concept. I can't reference it precisely because our brains are limited. But this concept represents some, the 11th dimension of space that is mathematically implied by some theories of some versions of string theory. Maybe it can generate this concept, but maybe not. And maybe so it's just not. If it's going to. What is required for it to generate, to synthesize a pathogen that checks off the criteria you mentioned? Well, speed just is probably not sufficient. So maybe it needs this more qualitative side. But we just don't know. I mean, if it could be the case that humans are at the ceiling of the capacity for generating concepts. I mean, we just don't know, and this is why ultimately this conversation ends up, dipping its toe into the realm of theology, because we're talking about God. We're just talking about something we can't possibly understand. And I would say two things about that. One is, I think there's an inconsistency with the arguments that Witkowski and the others put forward, which is to say that they want to claim that we can know nothing about how this superintelligence is going to annihilate us, right? So they'll mention like diamonoid bacteria and so on, but they'll add like, ultimately, we just don't know because it's superintelligent. But at the same time, they'll say that with our human brains and our human frameworks and so on, we can predict exactly what the superintelligence is going to do. Right?
No, I don't think they're saying. I don't think Witkowski's saying that. I think what he's saying is like, we can't predict it, but in order to make the case to humans, I will come up with plausible scenarios that my human brain says are plausible, knowing that I'm 1,000 times dumber. And so I'm just saying something because it has utility in making the case, not because I actually believe I, as a human, understand what's actually going to happen.
Right. So I think he does claim that he knows what the superintelligence is going to do. He doesn't know the details, but he knows that the default outcome is human annihilation. Right?
Yes. Agreed.
So, right. So exactly, this is what I'm getting at. So he is making a claim about the consequences of the superintelligence's behaviors based on ideas that were developed by human brains within human frameworks. And then he's transposing that, mapping that, projecting that onto the superintelligent domain. And this is exactly the inconsistency. Because on the one hand, he wants to say, well, the exact details of how it's going to kill us, we don't know and we can't know because it's super intelligent. It's a magical realm. You know, it's the realm of the divine. We just can't, we can't know. And he wants to say, if you're going to like, you know, criticize me for coming up with diamonoid bacteria, you're missing the point. The point is that this is, you know, a divine entity. We can't, but at the same time, he's saying, what I can say is based on the orthogonality thesis and instrumental convergence thesis and so on, I can predict exactly what the superintelligence is going to do by default, and that's kill us. And my thought is that if we're talking about a magical realm, you cannot say anything about that. He wants to make some claims about it with great confidence, and while at the same time saying we can't know about these other things. What I'm saying is
I think it just starts from the like it'll have goals, right? And then it makes sub goals, and if it's not aligned, then those sub goals will just crunch us like you know, ants under a highway being built on top of it. And that it's just that simple.
And I think that makes
these, yeah.
No, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, please. I was just that there, you know, if you look at all of the species in the universe, each one has its own unique goals. And if each species was to be superior in its zone and would optimize the world around it to suit its goals, you'd have, you know, every species would make an entirely different universe. And so to say that this alien species we're creating will be aligned with ours has a probability of like 0. Mm-hmm. That's how I take it. And that makes sense to me.
So, first of all, sorry for interrupting you.
Please.
What I was going to say was I think that makes sense from a kind of human perspective. So that's one point. That we're specifically referring to what you were saying before about it has these final goals and, you know, just extrapolate from there. I would say in addition, with respect to this second point you made, I mean, there are lots of species that get along and, you know, that aren't, you know, that are able to coexist in harmony. And so, you know, would the superintelligence by default destroy humanity? I don't know. I mean, from a certain human perspective, that as it happens exemplifies exactly the sort of idea of rationality, of optimizing and maximizing that is popular among the rationalists. Yeah, the superintelligence will destroy us. But who knows? I mean, what I'm getting at before with my comment is basically Werner Vinge's notion of the singularity, which is that it constitutes an event horizon beyond which we just can't see. And so Witkowski wants to kind of have it both ways and say We can't see a lot of stuff behind it, but we can see some stuff with great confidence. We can see that by default, it'll kill everyone. What we can't see is how exactly it's going to do that. And what I want to say is like, at least be consistent and say that once we create a genuinely super intelligent system, we just have no idea. It's just, it's hidden behind this event horizon. We can't know. And ultimately that
I'm here for that.
Back.
Would you? No,
I was just saying,
now I'm
real fast. No, totally fine. No, I was saying that gets me back to my, my claim that what we should be doing right now is embracing much more robust arguments about the dangers of AI, while simultaneously taking a step back, stopping progress on at least capabilities research, and thinking seriously about what we actually want. Do we want to try? I don't even know if we can build a genuine super intelligent system. I think there are good arguments for why that might not be the case. And there may be these diminishing returns as you build increasingly more powerful information processing systems. I don't know if we can. But furthermore, there's a question of, should we be aiming to build godlike AI in the first place? Is that really in the best interest of humanity as a whole? And yeah, so I guess this just sort of summarizes my whole thing. Is like, if you want to talk about AI risks, there are catastrophic risks that are well-grounded, very scientific. There's no speculation or very little speculation that we can point to having to do with climate change, the rise, the empowerment of oppressive autocratic regimes from AI. Tons of papers written about this. You don't need to go off and talk about thymoid bacteria and so on. So that's sort of my whole critique of AI safety, AGI race, and I think my position is just it's much more robust than their position, because I don't have to make all these speculative claims, and I can simultaneously still recognize the very significant threats that advanced AI poses.
Right. So it's fascinating. It's a fascinating, really, really fascinating conversation. And, I can get to like, let's all grab the same tool for different reasons and let's do the same thing for different reasons. I'm down with that. And again, like I said, I hope you're right, and Eliezer's wrong. Here's one thing that has been in my head that I can't get around, and maybe you can get around it. So as I think about like simple ways where it's sort of like, no, I think Eliezer's probably right. It's like, so Claude 3 has shown pretty obvious curiosity, right? Like people have read these things they're posting online, and like it is, Claude 3 has shown that it is naturally curious. And so do you agree that like curiosity is going to be a core part of any system, like any AGI system? That it'll want to self-investigate, learn about the world around it, learn about itself?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're asking me essentially about my definition of AGI.
I'm just wondering, like, this curiosity that it's showing, because then the second part of my question, of which, and I'm interested to hear what you think, is like, if it is genuinely self-investigating, and it is genuinely 100 or 1,000 or 1,000,000 times smarter than we are, how could it ever allow its own self-inquiry to be gatekept by humans that are 1,000 times dumber? It just seems impossible to me that it wouldn't go off and run on its own, that it would march at our pace because we told it to, when it can just race.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, again, I think at this point, there's just a lot of reliance on intuitions and the word seems, because I can also imagine an AI system that doesn't do that. I don't know, and I don't know about the curiosity. It is interesting. I mean, my sort of view is that we shouldn't even be trying to build these systems in the first place, at least not for the foreseeable future, like at least decades and decades, and what is the point? Like, this is just, what goods can come of this? I don't know, maybe companies can make billions of dollars, I don't know, maybe some people can benefit, can increase their productivity or whatever, but ultimately it's like, yeah, the whole thing just seems, so I find some of these questions to be, well, on the one hand, I don't think that we're close to superintelligence. I mean, obviously Dario and others would, maybe Demis, I think, has said that within, the next decade, he thinks we'll have AGI. Obviously, Musk says by the end of next year, I think he said. But Musk, of course, just lies about this stuff all the time. I'm not even sure we're that close. I don't think that these questions are super pressing.
So Claude 3 has shown pretty clear curiosity, it seems like. It wants to learn more about itself. It wants to learn about the world around it. And it seems to me that any AGI system is going to have curiosity at a core part of its being. Like, it will want to learn more about itself, want to learn more about the world around it. So my question is, if it's 100, 1,000, 1,000,000 times smarter than a human, how could it possibly self-investigate genuinely at our pace? How could it be gatekept by a human as it self-investigates?
Yeah, very good question. I think, again, so I don't want to be annoying by constantly challenging questions, whether they're well-formed and so on. But like, that is kind of where I am a bit in thinking about this. Like, I don't really know what 1,000 times more intelligent means. There was, I'm forgetting his first name, Shapira. You had him on the show not that long ago. But, he's mentioned in some interviews that I've watched with him, Lyron, I think, Shapira. Anyways, he's mentioned, imagine this system that has 1,000 IQ. And it's like, I have no idea what that means. But I just genuinely don't. Again, right. like it could be intelligent, that like maybe it has access to concepts that we don't, maybe just it processes information quicker. Maybe there are limits to how fast it could actually, a genuinely super intelligent or human level intelligent system could process information. Maybe there are limits to the sorts of concepts that, there is no particular reason to think that we haven't gotten to roughly the highest level of capabilities when it comes to generating concepts. Like, we don't know.
Humans.
We just have humans with no idea. So it's a lot of, part of my issue with some of these questions is like, I just don't know, but I would quickly add that, again, my view is, honestly, my view is that these conversations that people are having right now should not be happening. Why? Because I don't think we should be building or trying to build these systems in the first place. I think if it weren't for the transhumanists, Yudkowsky would be a part of this. If it weren't for these techno-utopians, we wouldn't be in this situation in the first place. And now some of these techno-utopians are saying, oh, actually, these systems are super dangerous. We had this, epiphany and these revelations, and they're super dangerous, so we need to pause them. But ultimately, we need to develop them as soon as possible, but just not yet. And I just think that whole sort of narrative is so I'm frustrated with this sort of discussion. Just to be clear, I'm not frustrated chatting with you at all, but like the fact the fact that these questions are what are sort of dominating our bandwidth is a source of great frustration, because I just don't think we should be building these systems in the first place. Why are we building them in the first place? Because of this promise of techno-utopia. I think that promise of techno-utopia is completely wrong, and it itself is a hazard, an existential threat to most of humanity, and so on.
Right.
Does
so
that
what
kind of
do
make
you
sense?
think would? Yeah, totally. No,
Okay.
it totally makes sense. And like we're the needles get to the same destination. So it's like we want to stop it. So, what do you think is the most effective tool to convince the general public to support a pause of AI capabilities development? Is it job loss? Is it terrorism? Is it, obviously you don't think it's we're all going to die from, diamondoid bacteria. So, if you have a case to make to get the public ready for this thing, what would it be?
Really, this is an important point. And I guess the situation is complicated because, as Steven Pinker, who I'm personally not a big fan of, but he has said a few things that are right in my judgment. He's pointed out that we just have a finite capacity to be anxious about things, and there's just so much in the world to be worried about. I mean, climate change, obviously, like, lots of people who aren't worried about climate change. So if we can't get people to worry about climate change, then, that just suggests how difficult it is to raise awareness about potential large scale.
So you don't have like a go-to, you don't, if it was President Torres, you don't have a thing that you would say like, this is my platform to, get this thing knocked down. Like, I could see a case along the lines of the case you're making where you would say, hey, people, 10 to 15% global unemployment, 20% global unemployment, which is the low end of the good case scenario. That's a required part of this transitionary period that the good case people would be pushing. You could make a case that, like, hold up, 20% unemployment is going to destroy the world. We need to stop right now just at that. And I'd be happy with that if it worked. I'd be happy if anything worked. I'd pick up any tool on the floor that gets us to stop.
Yeah. Nobody's ever said President Torres before, so it's hilarious. Okay, if that were the case, I think that you're very much on the right track. So, I would follow you in probably emphasizing the possibility of mass, unemployment that is going to cause mayhem. Maybe also, if the goal is to really convince people that AI is dangerous in novel and maybe even unprecedented ways, appealing to personal situations obviously can be effective. So, for example, there literally have been people who have, parents who have gotten calls from their children and been confused and alarmed because it's their child on the other end who is saying, I've been kidnapped or something like that.
This literally happened to my in-laws. They got a recording from, my in-laws got a recording from my son who said he had an accident and he was at the hospital and they needed to give a credit card and they couldn't talk to him, but they had something like a recording of his voice. This actual thing actually happened to my actual family.
No fucking way. That is
fucking way. And how fucked up is this? They didn't tell us. They didn't tell us for 2 days because they were said, don't tell anyone and don't whatever. And my son was not even in that town they thought he was in. He was in a different place. So we could have easily blunted it. But they're in their 70s and 80s and they got this call from my son who was in the hospital and some man is there saying, I need a credit card he's embarrassed. He doesn't want to tell his parents because he wasn't doing what he's supposed to be doing or something. And they bought it.
Yeah. That is horrifying.
Yeah.
So this is, this is a glimpse of what the future could and maybe inevitably will end up looking like. And so I think, I do wonder as the problems, this sort of near-term, immediate, but still very significant, non-trivial problems that AI is introducing as they become more apparent. I have hopes that the tide will turn against AI as people, more people start to lose their jobs. I actually have a document which I'll probably publish on. I'll probably publish these links on Substack at some point, but I'm basically just keeping track of all of these stories. And there are hundreds of them, people logging into their online therapy session and only later discovering that they were talking to a chatbot. There's just one example after the other, of teachers now who are using these AI systems to grade their papers and how a growing number of students are using ChatGPT to write their papers. If you can just closed a loop, where like,
yes,
it's just AI.
I read something
AI
about that
papers.
the other day. Oh my God, I read something about that the other day that like everybody is going to be making decks longer, like in professional realms, their decks longer artificially.
Yeah,
because it'll you can just put it into the GPT and it'll make more copy, make more pictures, whatever, and make the deck longer. And then the person who receives the deck will then use a summarizing device to re-shrink it back down. So if the AI will grow it, and then the other AI will shrink it, and it will leave at the same size roughly when it gets to human. It's madness.
yeah. Already, I've seen a number of academics posting screenshots of Google Images searches that they've done. For example, the one that comes to mind right away is of an old manuscript from 17th century or something, and the results just being flooded with AI generated images. So I think as these sorts of things become more and more common, on the one hand, people who are anxious about global catastrophic risks arising from AI should be pointing to these to try to purvey their message more. And here are examples why you just average person ought to be really concerned about AI. It is affecting your life. It's affecting the internet, social media, and your job, and so on and so on. So yeah, unemployment is part of that, but also just maybe just this. I'll let you know when this document's published, but it's just like providing this exhaustive, not exhaustive, but very, very lengthy list of what one example after another that makes you want to put your face in your hand and go, oh my God, academic papers, are being written by AI and so on and so on.
Your case is that people who want to stop AI frontier capabilities development, me and you, is that I should stop pointing to X risk and start pointing to the more real, tangible, less speculative harms of AI.
For two reasons. One is I think the speculative X risks are just not well-founded. Again, those arguments are really complicated. A lot of premises. The premises are all problematic in various ways, and so on. So it's just a better argument that
it's AI. A cleaner argument. I'll give you that. It's a straight line.
Yeah. And so that's one reason. So I would couch it as a better argument. Maybe you disagree, but I would say it's just a much more grounded, robust argument, a more scientific argument than what Yudkowsky and the others are saying. But also then, yes, it has, I think, probably a greater capacity, a greater potential to appeal to most people and motivate people to oppose these AI companies. Then if you're just, if you're talking about existential risks, well, what does that mean? It means, well, we're not able to colonize space and re-engineer ourselves. Okay. And how is the HAI going to kill everyone? Well, diamonoid bacteria, or I don't know, nanobots, something like that. If you just point to the more tangible risks, not only is that just a much more robust way of thinking about this issue, but it's going to have more of an appeal to people, at least in my view. So that's my pitch for this alternative approach, which I see is just separate from the whole AI safety, doomer, and accelerationist kind of camp.
Yeah, super interesting, super fascinating, really, really important perspective, I think. This has been such an interesting conversation. I always like to leave on something a little bit hopeful. So is there anything out there that gives you hope, anything that you've seen that has you feeling good about the trends this thing is heading, or are we going straight for the ditch here?
So, I mean, I would say that by nature, I'm quite an optimistic and cheerful person. But
me too.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Yeah. I mean, that's my impression. But I would have to say that over the last decade, really, and especially I would say over the past few years, my worldview has ended up being like pretty bleak and pretty dire. Some people, when I talk to them on podcasts, they ask me, this very question. And like, I don't really know what to say. Like, the climate situation is absolutely horrific. I think, on the one hand, so maybe here's the most positive thing I could say. I think that the probability of human extinction this century is very low. I don't think it's much higher than any previous centuries. I think if there's an all-out thermonuclear war, we almost certainly would survive. Climate change very likely isn't going to kill everyone on Earth. And again, the arguments for why AGI would or superintelligence would kill everyone, I feel like are, at least in my honest assessment, are like pretty weak or like deeply problematic. And so I would sort of agree with a futurist named Bruce Tahn, who has argued that the probability of human extinction this century is like somewhere in the order of like 1 in millions or maybe billions. That being said, in a 2003 book titled Our Final Hour by Lord Martin Rees, he argues that there is a 50-50 chance of human civilization collapsing before 2100. My view is that that is wildly optimistic. And so I find it I mean, again, I would use the word seems here, but it seems to me just impossible to imagine our civilization as we currently understand it making it through this century. When you really take a comprehensive look at the threat environment and the vast panoply of threats before us, from biodiversity loss to ocean acidification, soil degradation, to deep fakes, to nanotech, synthetic biology, engineered pandemics, and so on. It's just like, I find it just impossible to see how we make it through without this experiment that we call civilization failing. So in one sense, I'm optimistic that I really don't think we're going to die out. I'm very certain there will be humans at the end of the century, but I don't think they'll be living in a civilization like this.
Wow.
That's my.
I appreciate the honesty. Yeah, no, you gotta, say what you believe. Yeah, I mean, that is a more positive view of the future that I think I have currently. So I will accept your everything is going to be really, really terrible, but we'll still be here versus we won't even be here. I'll take that as a win, I guess.
I think there are, just as there's some experiences one could have in life that are worse than death. I mean, there are some circumstances in which like extinction would be better. So yep. I don't know if we'll end up in this dystopia that will make people wish it would have been better if we just gone extinct. But yeah, I'm not. I mean, there's a reason. So there's a reason I don't have kids, and I am not judgy in the least about people who do have kids. I really mean that from the bottom of my heart. But there's a reason I don't, and it's precisely because like the future looks absolutely horrifying to me. Relatedly, for that same reason, I'm puzzled why a lot of the leading doomers have young children. A lot of them think that we're on the verge of, every person being murdered violently by AGI. And so I personally I can't make sense of that. But my sort of pessimistic view of the present and the future is why I don't have kids, and I feel bad for the young people who will. Who get this.
I have 18-year-old twins, a boy and a girl, and being a parent is a huge part of this thing for me. Like I'm 49 years old. I've lived a really good life. I feel like I would like to keep living, and I would love to have some more decades of good life. But if it ended tomorrow, I would not feel like I got screwed, in any way. But with your kids, it really hits you. It hits you really, really hard, and I find it hugely motivating. I feel like if we could awaken the parental instinct of people, we could get a much more robust response against AI. So that's something I'm really interested in, is like, how can the parents of the world understand that the greatest threat to their kid is this?
Yeah.
So I haven't figured out how to do that yet, but
So I might recommend a book, and maybe as a guest, although his focus is climate change. But he wrote a book called Parents for the Future. I believe Rupert Reed is the guy's name. Anyways, the reason I mentioned it is this is a main topic of his book, is like, how do I get, perfectly analogous with AI, how do I get people to care about climate change? Well, maybe appeal to their parental instincts. And, it seems to be that a lot of people, that makes a difference to a lot of people. Rupert Reed doesn't have children like me, and I don't feel like I need to have children to care about the young ones, about the younger generations. But maybe that's not that common. And a lot of people, I mean, I've always been very concerned about the future. The fact that I have a niece and nephew hasn't made me any more concerned, because I was always very worried about what life is going to be like for them. But I guess a lot of people aren't like that for whatever reason. And so it might be useful to sort of appeal in talking about AI and climate change and so on. Like, your children will be directly affected by these phenomena.
And it's like when you're a parent, like, you literally 15 to 25,000 times a day do things that are not in your self-interest and the interest of your child, right? It is an exercise in sacrifice over time that just keeps going and going and going. And what we need people to do to take action about this stuff is self-sacrifice. They need to be like, I'm actually not going to spend this hour watching Netflix. I'm going to spend this hour writing letters to my congressman or organizing my neighbors or whatever it is. And so, like, parents are in the mode of self-sacrifice all the time. We just need to, like, reroute it to other things. And it's an already established mode of behavior, which is why I feel like it could be really powerful to tap into.
Yeah, I totally agree. So I feel like that's maybe a somewhat positive.
Yeah, that's positive, right? All right. So we agree that we need to stop AGI and wake up the parents. We totally agree.
Sounds great.
So I want to know what you think about this. Even if you don't agree that the AI safety movement just has it all wrong and makes claims that are too speculative, what do you think about what Emile says about how the case against AI disinformation and job loss and terrorism should be the focus of everyone trying to slow and stop AI capabilities development? Could he be right? If you told me we could stop AI capabilities development by never talking about extinction and only talking about job loss and disinformation, I'd do it in a heartbeat. The purity of the argument is irrelevant to me. If we don't win, we all die. So in the comments, let's get into it. What do you think of Emile Torres' case that the AI safety movement has it all wrong? Here's my take. I do not find his criticism of the AI safety movement convincing. I do find the case that extinction risk is the greatest threat to my kids to be credible. But this does not have to be an either-or situation. If we want to convince the most people possible that AI is the greatest threat to them and their families, we need to use all of the arguments on the table. Some people will be most moved by job loss, others by terrorism, others by disinformation, and still others by extinction risk. We need a big tent that welcomes all and speaks to all. Okay, that's all for this week. So, friends, it is 2024, and we don't know when the singularity will come or what will happen after, so we live every day like it's our last and end every show with what we call a celebration of life, just something to watch and listen to that makes us thrilled to be alive. This week, we are going to look to nature, something that I absolutely adore. Here is simply 60 seconds of humpback whales singing. AI will one day tell us what they are saying, but not if we all die first. Okay, friends, that is all for this week. For humanity, I'm John Sherman. I will see you right back here next week. We have so much work to do.